You know, we've been talking about the president's State of the Union address, and I tell you what, the president opened up talking about wanting to restore the soul of the nation, but how do you do that when you want to make abortion legal, or actually you want to force it on the entire nation until birth, abortion until birth nationwide? Pass bills that force religious employers to hire people who identify as transgender, trampling on religious freedom in the process, transgendering our children, like we were just talking about with Delegate LaRock. I mean, how do you restore the soul of a nation doing that? I'm telling you what, the president told some real whoppers in his State of the Union address. Well, joining me now to discuss this and some other items, who kind of fact-checking the president's address is Ben Johnson, senior reporter and editor at the Washington Stand. I encourage you to read the article he wrote analyzing the entire speech, currently at Washington Stand. That's WashingtonStand.com. Ben, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Always a privilege. Thank you.
So the president spoke about the duty to protect all people's rights and freedoms, but what he said after that suggests that this really is just about the interest of a few, not all.
Well, based on his remarks, I think the president only wants to protect abortionists, labor unions, and the transgender lobby. The Women's Health Protection Act is one of the things that he alluded to. He talked about codifying Roe. In fact, the so-called Women's Health Protection Act would go far beyond Roe, would strike down approximately 1,400 state pro-life laws that were on the books when Roe was operative. He also talked about passing the so-called Equality Act, which, as you said, would force Christians to hire LGBTQ employees, would eliminate women's privacy in intimate facilities, and it would prevent Christians from defending themselves with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act signed by President Bill Clinton. He also talked about signing the PRO Act, which would strike down right-to-work laws. So he's putting union rights ahead of workers' rights, LGBTQ rights ahead of women's and Christians' rights, and eliminating all the rights of Americans who are not yet born.
Ben, there's a lot more that we could spend unpacking in the President's State of the Union address. And again, that piece that Ben has written, thoroughly analyzing it, you can find it at thewashingtonstand.com. But I want to go to another topic that you've written about that also you have a piece up at the WashingtonStand.com. And it shows the hypocrisy of this administration, where they are suing states that have passed laws that would protect children from mutilation, from removing healthy body parts as a part of this whole transgender agenda. But then they announced that they are celebrating the International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation, and the FBI is going to be enforcing this law. How can you do both?
Well, you can't at all if you have a very well-defined worldview and an understanding of what's happening in both cases. In fact, the FBI said they would enforce this law as a form of child abuse. And yet at the same time, as you say, the Biden Justice Administration, the Justice Department, is trying to sue states, including already filing lawsuits in Arkansas and Alabama against states that are protecting underage girls from so-called gender reassignment surgery. Of course, female genital mutilation is a horrible practice, primarily concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa and African Arab nations. But you've got the irony here that while he's against that, he's opening the floodgates for the predatory gender reassignment industry to have access to underage girls' bodies. So as I got to researching this article for the Washington Stand, I found that they have very similar side effects. Transgender surgeries also render women infertile for life. So we might say that he's taking steps against female genital mutilation, but he's in favor of female genital mutation here at home.
Yeah, and this is, to be clear, as you pointed out, this is something that in my role at USERF, when I was chair there, we spoke out very forcefully about, because it is usually underage girls that this takes place with. And it is primarily something that happens internationally, but it is now happening here in the United States. And so I support the fact that the FBI would speak out against this to protect children from this. But it's the hypocrisy that I have a problem with, that they're now suing states that are taking actions to protect children from, as you described, the sexual or the transgender surgeries that render them infertile for life. But there seems to be no end to the hypocrisy of this administration.
Well, certainly not. And the Justice Department wrote a letter to all 50 states' attorney general telling them that there may, in fact, be a constitutional right for underage children, minors, unemancipated minors, to have the access to what they call gender-affirming care. But in fact, as I go into in the article at WashingtonStand.com, there is very little difference in terms of the actual function of both things, both that which they are affirming and that which they are condemning at the same time. The scripture says that out of the same stream you should not have salt water and fresh water. Brackish water should not come from a healthy stream. And yet that's precisely what you're hearing coming out of the mouth of officials in the Biden administration.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me. Ben Johnson, thanks so much for joining us today and bring this to our attention through the Washington Stand.
Thank you as always.